What to expect on the big day. Embryo transfer. Embryo transfer refers to a step in the process of assisted reproduction in which embryos are placed into the uterus of a female with the intent to establish a pregnancy. During the course of a normal menstrual cycle, the uterine lining, endometrium, thickens and thins under hormonal influence. The thinning of the endometrium results in menstruation. The main hormones that cause these endometrial changes are estrogen and progesterone. To achieve pregnancy, a thick endometrium is needed for the embryo to implant, receive nutrients, and form a placenta. During the course of gestational surrogacy, the endometrium of the carrier needs to be prepared for the embryo transfer. There are several ways the IVF physician can prepare the surrogate's uterus for the transfer. One method is to use the natural menstrual cycle and transfer the embryo on the appropriate day. Other methods involve what's termed a stimulated cycle, in which the gestational carrier is treated with hormones. These stimulated cycles typically involve treating the surrogate with estrogen and progesterone, but can include other hormones. Estrogen and progesterone can be administered orally, pill, vaginally, or via a patch. Other hormones often have to be administered by injection. Again, the goal of these treatments and methods is to thicken the endometrium, thus allowing the embryo to implant and achieve pregnancy. A scientific review in 2013 concluded no single method of endometrium preparation for frozen embryo transfer is more effective than another. Before the embryo transfer, the surrogate must have already been through medical and psychological screening, had the gestational surrogacy agreement drafted, reviewed, and finalized. She has signed and notarized her legal agreement with the intended parents. Started taking medications, hormones, to prepare her body for the embryo transfer. Had consistent communication with Omega Family Global and the IVF Center about any changes and all appointments. Embryo transfer goes as quickly as your wedding day. There is so much planning that goes into having the embryo transfer. Then you show up at the IVF center and the actual procedure only takes 5 minutes. It is over in a blink of the eye. All of your nerves and anxiety for this moment are over before you know it. It is very much like getting a pap smear. Each IVF center has its own protocol for embryo transfer preparation. Some IVF centers will provide you with a day-to-day calendar for the month previous to the embryo transfer, with the date of the embryo transfer known from the start. Other IVF centers will update you with the protocol as you appear for each appointment. Regardless of your IVF center's protocol, it is very important that you contact your third-party coordinator at the IVF center if you have any questions or concerns about medications or anything involving the IVF cycle. Tips for preparing for the embryo transfer. Some IVF centers will require you to bring a companion who can drive, since they give you a muscle relaxer to quiet your uterus and calm your nerves. If you are given such medications, you must have someone to drive you home. Plan ahead to know who will be watching your children and who will be driving you to the IVF center on the day of the embryo transfer. This will reduce your stress on the day of the transfer. Know the IVF center's protocol for bed rest, if required, after the embryo transfer. Again, every IVF center has a different protocols pre- and post-embryo transfer. Be sure to know what your IVF physician is requesting prior to the day of the embryo transfer. You may be required to be on bed rest for up to 3 days, or you may be instructed that no bed rest is needed. If you are required to have rest the day of the embryo transfer, or as much as strict bed rest for 3 days, plan ahead and have easy meals prepared ahead of time. This will make everyone's life easier as you rest and relax. You want to avoid stress at this time. What to expect on the big day. Embryo transfer. You will be asked to arrive at the IVF center anywhere from 2 hours to 45 minutes prior to the embryo transfer scheduled time. When you arrive, the IVF center may have you sign releases authorizing the number of embryos to be placed in your uterus. The IVF center may provide you with a hospital band indicating the intended parent's name. This is for verification of the embryo to ensure the right embryo is being placed in the right surrogate. You will be asked either to undress from the waist down or to get into a hospital gown. Each IVF center has a different procedure. The IVF center will provide you with a blanket so you stay warm. You may be asked to take a muscle relaxer prior to the embryo transfer. However, not all IVF centers use this medication since the procedure is painless. Some IVF centers will perform the embryo transfer in a surgical suite, and others will perform it in an exam room. In either room, your feet will be in stirrups, much as during a regular pelvic exam. The embryo transfer is a procedure performed under ultrasound guidance. For this reason, you will want to have a full bladder. The nurse will come in and prepare you for this ultrasound. The ultrasound is done through your abdomen, similar to an OB ultrasound. She will clear the blanket from your stomach while continuing to provide you with privacy. You will be able to see the ultrasound screen throughout the embryo transfer. The IVF physician will enter the room, insert a speculum, and will clean your cervix. The physician will then place a catheter through your cervix and into your uterus. Once the physician knows that the passage is clear and the uterus easily accessed, the embryos will be brought into the room for placement. The embryos will be floating in liquid in a syringe with a long catheter tube. You will be able to watch the ultrasound screen as the physician places the catheter tube high into your uterus and releases the fluid containing the embryos into your uterus. On the ultrasound screen, this will appear as a bright white cloud on the screen. The catheter and syringe will be taken back to the lab to be checked under a microscope to be sure that the embryo has indeed been transferred. Once the clearance is given, the physician will remove the speculum, take your legs from the stirrups, and you will be asked to lie still and rest. This rest period varies based on the IVF center. You will dress back into your street clothes, and you may either walk out or be wheeled in a wheelchair out of the IVF center. You will follow the aftercare instructions the IVF center provides to you. You will need to have your hormone levels checked between the time of the embryo transfer and the actual pregnancy test. Most IVF centers will perform the first pregnancy test 10 to 12 days following the embryo transfer. Remember, this is not the end, but just the beginning. We hope you achieve your surrogacy pregnancy and look forward to sharing in all the milestones that come going forward. Any further questions? Please feel free to contact us. Omega Family Surrogates. Amazing women fulfilling dreams.